A speed bump gets the budget grand bargain off track, and there's a Kennedy in the race for governor. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. A lot going on this week, politically and governmentally. We'll see where it goes. Kent Redfield is back, Professor Emeritus of Political Science, University of Illinois, Springfield, and a very knowledgeable person about campaign finance. Kent, welcome back.
Good to be here.
Andy Maloney is here again, State House Bureau Chief for the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin. And everybody needs somebody who understands the law, so here we are. Good to be here. Speaking of laws, one of them would be a state budget if it ever gets passed. There has been talk for weeks in the state Senate that President Cullerton, the Democrat, and leader Christine Radogno, the Republican, have been working together on a grand bargain, which has come down to like a dozen bills, interlocking, let's get something done, raise taxes, make some reforms that the governor might smile upon, and show that the Senate can get something done to move the needle on a state budget that we haven't had in more than a year and a half. But as it turned out, this past week, the Senate ended up voting on 4 bills, passing 3 what are considered simple ones about government consolidation and purchasing rules are a couple of them, but one on pension reform didn't pass. All the yes votes on all of them came from Democrats. Republicans said, we want to wait for the whole package. Therefore, there were some present votes and no votes. So we did not get the show of bipartisanship. What does this mean, Andy?
I think it means that the grand bargain is going to be as tough or perhaps tougher than maybe some people expected. As you said, there was sort of this show of bipartisanship when this thing was announced, this big package. We had the Senate President, John Cullerton, a Democrat, the Senate Republican leader, Christine Radogno, have a joint press conference and sort of say a lot of things about, we want to show that this can be done. We want to show that we can put out a bipartisan deal, despite all of the gridlock and all of the negativity and the rhetoric, and this is going to materialize in the Senate. And we can't guarantee that the House is going to do something. We can't guarantee that the governor is going to do something, but the governor's not involved in this. It's just the Senate. We're going to do it, and we're going to do it very soon.
And that was even before the new General Assembly was sworn in early January.
Right, but once they got to voting, which, right when they started, there were some hang-ups with Leader Radogno sort of saying, we agreed to attack this all at once. There are still some hang-ups. We're not on board with all of these bills. So why are we moving this process forward now? Let's go later, with the Democrats sort of responding, we're ready to vote. Let's get some votes. Let's, we promised people we were going to start doing this early. And then, like you said, the easy bills came and went, with Radogno sort of throwing up, some nominal opposition, but still passing. And then the pension reform bill, which, the topic has been tough for a long time around here. The president's preferred pension plan sort of went up in smoke. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, where is this? And give me the, let's. The governor in all of this has said, when he said in the fall, I want to meet every day with the legislature to get a deal, and then he said, well, Mike Madigan didn't come to a meeting, and there have been some hang-ups, so we're not going to meet. Then he has been encouraging the Senate to do this, but all along, even as the package of bills has included things like a 4.99% income tax. It's now 3.75. It used to be 5. Republicans railed against 5. But Radogno has said, well, it'll be less than 5, and 4.99 is in the package of bills that the Republicans were talking about supporting, including Christine Radogno, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate. But the governor has stayed on the sidelines in saying, I really want them to go forward, and we're showing great progress, and they're showing that they want to do things like help workers' compensation, things I want for businesses in Illinois. But he won't say if he's for any part of the package. He won't say if he would sign a bill with a 4.99% tax increase. So what does that do to the whole thing?
Well, it probably means that nothing is actually. Eventually, we're going to have to get the governor and the speaker to the table. Right now, it certainly allows the governor to say, when people say, what's the hang up? Where are we going? He says, talk to the Senate, and so that allows him to avoid directly answering questions about this. And what happened, intentional or not, in terms of the roll calls that took place, kind of reaffirmed what we already know. The Senate Democrats can pass some easy things all by themselves. But when we get to a tough vote, and pensions is not the toughest of those votes.
Yeah, the tax increase will be a lot tougher.
What do they have? 14 votes, 18, whatever they had.
I think it was 18.
Yeah, and so you're going to have Democrats and Republicans on these tough bills. And the last thing you want is to make a tough vote as a legislator, but even worse than making a tough vote is making a tough vote that then doesn't pass.
Right.
You don't want to vote for a tax increase that
Right.
doesn't pass. And so, you've got placeholders for all of these things that we need to do, and some sweeteners that really don't have anything to do with the budget, impasse, like casinos. But
That's right. They would. One of the bills they didn't even vote on was establish 6 new casinos across the state, including land-based one in Chicago. I mean, things that people have wanted for a long time, but are very hard to pass even on their own.
So can you get enough bipartisan support for tough bills to put something over in the House? I think that's very, very difficult.
What do we do? I mean, we've been a year and a half without a budget, and now since January 1st, there is no new spending authority for universities or some social service agencies. All of that 10% of state government that is not part of court orders or continuing resolutions.
Yeah, well, as we'll probably get to later, you'll have more people filing
lawsuits
and trying to get into court. But I think your characterization at the outset was pretty spot on. I mean, we still had the Senate president and a minority leader saying this doesn't blow up the whole deal. We're still talking about this. What you saw with these roll calls was just a little drama. It was just a little hang up. We're going to get back to this. But right now it's really hard to project out a scenario unless you start getting the governor and the speaker together and getting them to the table, which again is also really, really hard to imagine at this stage.
Yeah.
It's really hard to imagine how they get some kind of bargain done, much less this bargain, a package of bills that, as I think I've said before on this program, would be the most significant number and breadth of reforms in one legislative session than I've seen in 5 years around here.
Wow.
So it's going to be tough.
It will.
The other thing
Sure.
is if the Attorney General is successful in her lawsuit to get the temporary restraining order removed so that we're not going to pay state workers because we don't have a budget, then that makes the deadline. The real deadline in this was July 1st of 2015. And if this would have been any other year, when you go, and it's certainly in my memory, in the 90s, working for UIS, we didn't have a budget on July 1st. By the middle of the month, I was looking about how can I take out some loans because I can't pay my mortgage, and everybody knew the state was going to shut down and people weren't going to get paid, and lo and behold, we got a budget.
Right. It was usually 2 or 3 weeks, whenever the next paychecks were due. But the
Right.
St. Clair County Circuit Judge, who said, because so many state employees have contracts, you must continue to pay those even without an appropriation. A later court decision said, based on back pay, it made it very clear, and then the state Supreme Court said, if I'm right, Andy, you can't pay state employees without an appropriation. So Lisa Madigan has said she's going to court. Of course, the governor now says, I'm the champion of state employees. I want them paid. Lisa Madigan wants to stop your pay. And interestingly, and she says, this is just the appropriate time because I was hoping after the election, legislators would come together, as they said, and reach an agreement, and they didn't. So we have a political battle going. There was actually, within the last week, Tim Schneider, the state chairman of the Republican Party, which is largely funded by the governor, had a press call where he talked to reporters to let everybody know it's Lisa Madigan's fault who wants to stop state employees from getting their pay. And Lisa Madigan, of course, fires back. The governor, obviously there are going to be political differences about who's at fault, but she says you have to do that. Susana Mendoza, the comptroller, makes it very clear the governor under the Constitution needs to propose a balanced budget, and he has not. And the governor will say, well, I'm leaving it to the legislature, and it's going to be that way. He told our editorial board that too. Even in his budget address coming up next week, he's not likely to put numbers in it. He's going to do maybe what he did last year and say, either you give me a budget that works or give me authority to take what money we have and cut it myself, but without spelling it out. So we'll see what happens. And in the meantime, and because of the Lisa Madigan lawsuit to possibly end state employee pay by the end of February, there are competing Democratic and Republican proposals in the Illinois House to keep state workers getting paid on some sort of stopgap. But Governor Rauner then put out a video in the last few days to state employees saying, I would veto the Democratic plan, which Sue Scher of Decatur is sponsoring, because the money would run out at the end of the normal fiscal year, I guess June 30th. I want the Republican plan, which Avery Bourne is chief sponsor of, state representative, which would make it a continuing appropriation for state workers, so you wouldn't even have to pass an appropriation in the future. So what's going to happen?
That is a great question. That is the ultimate question. And it gets bogged down, I think, even more. You have all of these sort of battles that are related to the state budget. Well, then you also have sort of the outside force of being a year and a half or even just a year from election season, or election season is sort of all 4 years now. We're sort of in a perpetual campaign. Plus, you have a lot of stuff going on at the federal level that even the constitutional officers and sort of the political players who are already wrapped up in all of this are sort of taking swipes at each other over. So it's a very convoluted place right now in Springfield.
Well, you mentioned the election season, and it is now upon us. I mean, we've known this. Oddly, Governor Rauner, who put recently $50 million into his own campaign fund from his own money. He made 188 or so last year, according to his tax return. So he's putting a third. Who would put a third of their annual salary into their next campaign? Well, he did. And it would also, I'm sure, be used to help the party. As he does that, he tells people like the editorial board of the State Journal Register he's not really involved in politics and is most laser focused on the state budget, which he's letting the Senate negotiate. But in the meantime, Chris Kennedy, who lives in Kenilworth, he is Robert F. Kennedy's son, one of his many children, and he used to run the Merchandise Mart in Chicago. He, for a while, was chairman of the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois. He's talked about running for statewide office before, and now he is announced running for governor. And so the Democratic race is going. There is already one other announced candidate, Mewa Pawar, who is kind of a reform-minded alderman from the north side of Chicago, who has announced that he's a younger guy, not well known. There is someone named J.B. Pritzker, who lives in Chicago. He's a big business person and actually is worth more than Bruce Rauner is, about 3 times more, at least. And he has, some companies, Pritzker Group companies and investment firms and factories, I think, is likely to run. And then there's some legislators, Daniel Biss, Andy Manar, and some Congress people, Sherry Bustos and Robin Kelly, looking at it. So how early is it for this, and is this necessary?
Oh, it's not too early. I mean, we are in the perpetual campaign. The governor never stopped campaigning since he's been elected. And we now have a fairly effective, we had a fairly effective message in the legislative elections. It's all the speaker's fault. It's, the speaker is the political boss of Illinois.
According to all the Republican Party and the governor.
Yeah, and so everybody's controlled by the speaker. I mean, that's not true. Madigan has never been and never will be a political boss the way that, Richard J. Daley was a political boss who controlled legislative, executive, and judicial within Cook County. Madigan is one part of, the political system. But we've been very effective in terms of that. And so now it's all about, Kennedy is somehow
even the governor tweeted calling Kennedy a Madigan crony.
Yes.
And
so
Twitter is getting more popular. Perhaps we have a president to thank for that.
And so one of the questions is, if you get to 2018 and you've gone 4 years without a budget, can it's Madigan's fault. Is that enough to run on? I mean, and so there's pressure on the governor, to decide whether or not he wants to run this out and have the courts run and part of state government and the rest of state government get starved. But one of the interesting questions is going to be: do you need a rich man to take on a rich man? Pritzker or Kennedy. You've got other voices who are saying now, the problem is we need somebody who's with the little people who, if you don't have any money, you're going to make that a virtue, and so you get those other voices, and we got one today from, Senator Bliss, who's
from Evanston,
wants to run, and he's talking about campaign finance reform and getting big money out of politics.
Right, although that wouldn't take effect in the current year's election, because I saw the news
no, of course.
Yeah. But he's talking about that issue.
What's my impact?
And how terrible
it?
it is that big money is now seen as a necessity in so many Illinois campaigns. I will also say that Chris Kennedy, I know, says that it's an insult to his family, it's an insult to him to talk about this crony and bossism when Bruce Rauner, in his view, is blaming other people for the problems of stuff that he's not getting done as governor in more than 2 years.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this shakes out in the primary, assuming Kennedy is in it and he stays in it at least through that round. In my mind, you've cleared at least a couple of hurdles with a guy like Kennedy getting in. Obviously, the financing, he's wealthy, and the name recognition is well known.
He is not a billionaire. I asked the question. As I said to him, I asked Bruce Rauner that when he was new, and at that time Bruce Rauner said, kind of depends on how the market's doing on a day-to-day basis, but Kennedy clearly said he's not. So,
right.
Clearly, so he's not of that magnitude.
Not quite that magnitude. Nevertheless, it probably has more money in his pocket than the average person.
I would say so.
But you're right. One of the House floor leaders, Barbara Flynn Curry, gave some voice to this and said, well, obviously financing is a plus, but is it better than sort of the narrative? Well, we've got one rich white guy versus another rich white guy, and is that the message that the Democratic Party is?
Representative Curry has a nice way of putting things.
Yeah, very, very distinct. And I should be clear, she is not endorsing anyone in that race.
Yeah, she said she hasn't endorsed. And she's actually a top lieutenant of Speaker Madigan, which I'm sure the other side would say, but she's obviously a very long-serving member, very strong views on social issues, and a very articulate legislator.
Right.
So we'll see where that goes. You mentioned federal issues. Illinois is in an odd situation right now. We have a governor who has friends in the Trump administration, but still doesn't really use the name Trump very much when he's talking, because he doesn't want to offend the people in Chicago who don't like Trump, and he doesn't want to say anything too bad about the president, apparently, because he doesn't want to offend the people who made most of central and southern Illinois red, except the Metro East area. And we have two United States senators now, with Mark Kirk defeated by Tammy Duckworth, who are pretty in line. I'm not sure if they voted for any of the Trump nominees. I think they did maybe for Elaine Chao for transportation, because she's Mitch McConnell's wife. But other people like Betsy DeVos for education, Durbin, and Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth were both no's. Our governor is a very strong advocate of Betsy DeVos. He likes charter schools, and he knows her. But how the U.S., the change in administrations and all of this kind of interesting day-to-day drama coming out of Washington will affect Illinois is still uncertain.
Certainly, and as a state that is Democratic, that went heavily
other than the governor.
Yeah, heavily for. I mean, in terms of the voting population, if we do things like on health care, there could be some things that in both Medicaid and Medicare reform and the Affordable Care Act that would make difficulty for the state of Illinois. Funding formulas get done by a Republican Congress and a Republican president who, again, may be wanting to reward red states and not be as favorable to blue states. I mean, there are fiscal implications for if some of these things get passed, how those are going to affect the state of Illinois. Social issues, generally, I mean, the governor says, I have no social agenda. And, if we, the Republican brand in, over the next 2 years is a lot of emphasis on abortion, on gay rights issues, transgender issues, those sorts of things that can cause problems for the governor in the suburbs.
And I think, President Trump, I think, made a point of not undoing a gay rights executive order from President Obama, but abortion, clearly, he has talked about this next Supreme Court, if they get their justice on, there's worry about that. In fact, there was a group of, some men included, but a women's agenda proposed in the rotunda of the State House this week, and one of the bills pushed by Sarah Feigenholtz, state representative, Democrat from Chicago, is if Roe v. Wade, which made abortion legal in the 1970s, is overturned at some point, the Illinois law now says that abortion would again become illegal in Illinois, except to save the life of the mother, I think, or most of it would be gone. And she is trying to pass legislation to undo that trigger, to say Illinois would have its own set of laws, not because if it goes back to the state, she doesn't want that trigger to hit and make abortion illegal here again. So this is the kind of thing we're going to hear a lot more of, isn't it?
It's been
Andy?
fascinating to see how much energy the change in administration at the federal level has sort of provoked in the State House. I think there's a tendency, at least amongst me and reporters I know, to kind of assume things are we're going to sort of stay in our bubble and sort of talk about our state issues, but those things are never completely devoid of the outside context. And so you mentioned this particular social issue. Some House lawmakers were on the floor just sort of blasting Trump over immigration policy, and in particular some Jewish legislators and some others who were talking about treating immigrants and refugees unfairly, and kind of just took 30 to 40 minutes just to kind of rave about that. And so it's been interesting to watch that sort of play out in the early stages of this session.
I guess the big question is, as 2018 looms, and you had this giant women's march in many cities, including Chicago and some in Springfield. I think 1,000 people in Springfield the day after President Trump got sworn in. How does this translate into 2018? Often, certainly with Congress people, it's Congress, sometimes a new president's party loses some after 2 years. Will this hurt Bruce Rauner in 2018? Well, will this help the Democrats, I guess, this anti-Trump energy?
The bill about the abortion trigger is a perfect example of, how do you get something concrete? People who want to do something, well, here's a concrete bill. And if you then put it on the governor's desk, who's got a very conservative Republican caucus.
But he's been pretty pro-choice. Because he just didn't talk about it during the campaign, so he ran as a moderate social Republican.
He's got a big funder, Richard Uihlein, who funds Liberty Principles PAC, who's very, very socially conservative. And so, we'll put some
Who runs those U-line trucks all over the country with packaging materials. Yes.
So we can put some pressure on the governor. Now, that bill also has some language involving federal or state funding for, I think, Medicaid abortions, and that would give the governor out. He would say, well, I want a clean bill. I don't want to have this other thing there. But you're going to see, because it's a different context at the federal level, then people look at it strategically as well as policy. How can we make the governor uncomfortable?
Yeah. One of the things that happened, just as we talk about President Trump, Corey Lewandowski, who was his first campaign manager when he announced, I guess, came down the escalator at Trump Tower and said he was running, and Corey Lewandowski was with him and had a few bumps along the road himself, but is now a consultant on Pennsylvania Avenue, just, I think, within view of the White House. So, help guide, let Trump be Trump and won things. So Sangamon County Republicans, Sangamon County went for Trump over Hillary Clinton. There were 700 people at this $100 a plate dinner. Mr. Lewandowski was telling interesting stories about Donald Trump, and it was kind of fun. There were, 20 demonstrators, at least at the door I saw, saying, we're not going away, and, human rights, and Abe Lincoln would be rolling over in his tomb, I think it said, one of them. It's just an interesting thing, though, but there was the governor was there. He wasn't there long. But interestingly, and I guess I'll just switch back to some state things, he talked about wanting, the good, solid Republican base is helping move the agenda at the State House, and we're going to take over the state in 2 years in 2018. Is that possible at this point?
The map would argue against it. It generally, you got a new president, you got enough change, you've upset enough people. Generally, midterm elections do not, don't favor the president's party. And the Democrats showed an ability to match the governor's money. I mean, they didn't get outspent, but they still had plenty. They raised plenty of money from their traditional sources. So, it's hard to see how you can move that many seats. But the Democrats did not have a firm, coherent message, and that's really the problem for both. Whoever is the Democratic candidate for governor and the legislature is what's the Democrats' message. If it's why should we replace Bruce Rauner with somebody else, and what's the positive message? And that's the governor's advantage has been that he has a coherent message, and he's very focused on that and stays on point. Democrats don't.
We'll see where it goes. And Andy, just on funding of some social services who want some funding, is that going to work, do you think, in this time?
Well, they're sort of saying that they've got a stronger claim than the state workers. They say that the state signed contracts with us, and we deserve to be paid just like the state workers, probably more. And they cite sort of the constitutional duties of having to come up with a budget and just some various contract claims.
Okay.
We'll see where it goes, as you say.
Which is a fine way to end the program. Kent Redfield, thank you. Andy Maloney, thank you. I'm Bernie Schoenburg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.